screen? Perfect. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Megan Arisman, and I am with the McCombs Plus program. We offer coaching, Manage Plus projects, and offer leadership workshops and webinars just like this one. This webinar is our last webinar of the year, but it is part of a monthly webinar series sponsored by McCombs Plus. This session will be recorded and posted to Canvas, where you can find all sorts of recordings of previous webinars and workshops. They're always available to you, and they are on that Canvas page. Something might be fun to do when you miss us over the summer. You're going to be emailed a link to this recording, as well as receive an evaluation survey after today's webinar. Your feedback is critical to our future planning, which we're going to get started soon. So I appreciate you filling that out. Today, we are pleased to welcome our wonderful McCombs Plus coach, Dr. Allison Alford, as she presents our webinar, Being Your Best Self, Managing Anxiety About Life Transitions. Dr. Allison Alford has 14 years experience teaching university courses, and her specialty is training others in conflict resolution techniques, teamwork, meeting facilitation, and people skills for leaders. As a communication coach, Dr. Alford has worked with professionals, MBA students in the fields of engineering, tech, publishing, human resources, sales, finance, and more. She believes that anyone can improve any aspect of communication with effort and energy. Dr. Alford holds a MA and PhD in Communication Studies from UT Austin, as well as a BA in International Studies from Texas A&M University. She currently lives in Waco, Texas, where she is a clinical assistant professor at Baylor University, and also owns Good Talk Communication Consulting. When she's not working, she enjoys reading podcasts about business topics, drinking obscene amounts of coffee, and taking long walks with her kids and husband. And now I'm pleased to turn it over to Dr. Allison Alford. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I am really glad to see a lot of bright, shiny faces here, or maybe instead of faces, I should say your profile pictures. And I want to say thank you for coming, and please feel free to keep it on mute or keep the camera off. This is a relaxed and easy time. And maybe I should say up front, you're not going to be asked to do a breakout room or anything strenuous, because the goal of today's webinar is to think about how to reduce or manage any anxiety. So we would never want our webinar to cause any more. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about anxiety, but I want you to know there are many other webinars and podcasts that I have done. So if you like this one, or if you're just interested in exploring more topics, make sure to go to our Canvas page, and it's under Training and Development, and then Plus Talks. That's where some of the podcasts are that I have done recently. And there's, of course, a lot more there by some excellent coaches that you can discover. I also, as Megan mentioned, have a consulting and coaching business. And this is what my website looks like. I recently had it redone, so I had to show it to you. But I wanted you to know that you can schedule coaching with me on my website under the packages link, and by clicking on this one here in the navy blue, and that'll take you directly to schedule some coaching sessions on my calendar. And my understanding is that current students have until the end of June to use their hours, graduating students, and continuing students have until the end of July to use their hours for the year. So make sure, if that's wrong, Deidre, you can correct me in the chat, and make sure to get those hours scheduled and use all of your hours for the year. Never let those things go. They are valuable. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We're talking about anxiety. So I want to get started first by doing a breathing exercise together. Okay, and so we're just going to really start this webinar by being more relaxed. And so this breathing exercise is called alternate nostril breathing. And I'm going to show it to you. And I want you to do it as well at the same time, if you can. Don't do it if you're driving, right? That might be dangerous. But this is going to be a closed mouth breathing activity. And the goal is to breathe very deeply. And so we place one finger over our right nostril, breathe in to the maximum amount, then switch to the other nostril and fully breathe out. Okay, so it looks like this. That's it. You got to keep your mouth closed. Now you're supposed to do that several times until you feel calmer. 5 times is a great standard to start with. And if you're able to do that right now, then you might notice that you immediately feel a little bit more calm. And that's because those deep breaths help oxygenate our body more fully. Because when we're breathing while we're talking, or our normal breathing is what the specialists call chest breathing. We breathe enough to fill our lungs adequately, but not to fill our lungs deeply or fully, or even fill up our belly with air. So practicing breathing is one of the very first things that we're looking at as a way to reduce anxiety. Now, what kind of anxiety are we talking about? Anxiety over transition, specifically for transitioning from being a student to the future career that you have ahead. So we're going to explore those phases of those transitions, some of the key terms, make sure we're all on the same page, and then we'll get to the tips and the specific things that you could try. And we'll talk about why this is beneficial for you and wrap up. And then what we're going to do is turn off the recording, but stay in the webinar for Q&A. So if you have a question, but you don't want it to be on the recording for everyone to hear, then you can certainly stick around at the very end for that. And I want to encourage you as we go, please put things in the chat if you have a question, or if you have tried any of these things and they work for you, please let us know that. Or if you, are experiencing these same feelings, that certainly is helpful to establish that there's community who are going through these things together. And I have been there, right? Not in the MBA program, but in a master's and a PhD program at UT. And when I did my PhD, I was also a mom to 2 kids with a spouse who worked a lot. And so we were really struggling to figure out how to manage all those pieces, especially at the end, as we were really, really done with grad school and kind of ready to move on. And so I understand what those feelings of being ready to transition are like. Now, you might only be in your first semester, you might be at the very end. Everybody's in a very different place as we think about transitioning. But regardless, it's probably in the next year to year and a half that you will be moving on from grad school into your next job. So that first phase of 2 phases, there's two phases we can think of for transitioning. And the first one is that job seeking phase. So the job seeking transition phase is for those of you who are still looking. You're still looking for a job and thinking about that transition and what to do and how to accomplish all that's necessary for job seeking and securing a position is sometimes anxiety producing. And so when we think about the different ways that anxiety might show up, it's through uncertainty, unknowns, and even sometimes thinking about unfairness. What I mean by uncertainty is that many of you don't know what it is that you want to do, right? So you might be deciding, do I want to stay in my current company and move up? Do I want to switch industries? Do I want to move out of Texas or move, to somewhere where my family is? And there are many unknowns. And those unknowns are, when am I going to get a position? Will it be the right one? Will it be during this season that is supposedly the biggest hiring season? And as we think about these things, we sometimes notice what I'm going to call unfairness, which is when we see some of our peers getting jobs and we're not getting the same traction. Or this has happened to me, you're in a team project with someone and then you see them succeeding and you think, that person, I'm so much more qualified, it should have been me. So there are a lot of, these things are anxiety producing in phase 1 of job seeking. But we also can think about phase 2. And phase 2 for job seeking is those who are job ready. This is our phase 2 of transitioning, is those who are job ready. So this applies to those who already have secured a position. And now you're just thinking about finishing grad school, Maybe thinking of the projects that you have due or tests, you're thinking of the ceremony, you're thinking of moving, you're thinking of what it will be like to be a new professional in this career. And a lot of times that is a brand new career, right? Because you might be doing some industry shifting. And this is, in this phase, Wintland and Roten characterize this with 3 A's: anticipation, adjustment, and achievement. So different from the previous phase, this phase includes anticipation of being ready to go there, the adjustment of getting into the new job, and then finding your footing and exploring how to achieve in the new role. And those are things that can sometimes cause us anxiety because we think, I really want to perform well when I get there, but I'm just not sure how to do it, how long it will take, or if that will happen. And so, as you can tell, just if me talking about these things has caused kind of a tightening in your stomach or a tightening in your chest, that doesn't surprise me, because just hearing about different types of transition can cause our body to react. And you're thinking about the specifics related to you. So let me remind you, I can't see you. You can do your nostril, your alternate nostril breathing again. And we're going to continue to talk about ways that you can tackle those feelings. But first, we're going on to explore those key terms and say, what are those feelings? What are these emotions? And what do we mean when we use the term anxiety? So first, I want to start with the term stress and think about what stress is. And stress is a concept that even small children know about and might talk about, being under stress. I personally have a 6th grader and an 8th grader, and they talk about stress, and stress is real and alive in children and adults. And stress is an emotional response caused by a trigger or a stressor. All right, so stress, it does bring up emotions, and those emotions are negative. And this trigger can be short-term, like a work deadline or a performance that you have to do, or it can be a long-term trigger that persists over time, such as if you are experiencing discrimination or if you're experiencing chronic illness. And we know scientifically that people who experience stress, they have reactions in their body. And those bodily reactions include things such as both mental symptoms and physical symptoms, like irritability, anger, fatigue, stomachache, headache, trouble sleeping. I don't know about you, but sometimes teeth grinding, or I found myself earlier this year holding my jaw really tightly, and I didn't notice at the time, but then in the evening I would realize, oh, my jaw hurts, and I was just holding it really tightly. And so stress is an emotional reaction that manifests in these challenging, often mostly negative ways in our body. Now, I say often and mostly because the fact is that there are some types of stress that can spur us on to greatness, right? If we felt relaxed all the time, we might not have the impetus or the motivation to do something about it. And so we do want to learn how we can let stress motivate us, but we want it to motivate us to get out of it. Okay, so stress responses recede, go away in the absence of the stressor trigger. So if I told you, every one of you has to turn on your microphone and talk for 2 minutes about your stresses in your life, that would be a stress trigger. And when I remove that stressor, which you do not have to do that, no, that's a little bit mean of me, sorry, then the stressor should recede. And so the difference between stress and anxiety is that the way that the emotion recedes. So anxiety is somewhat different, and yet it manifests in the same way in our body. So anxiety is that emotional response. It's tension, it's worry, it's thoughts, physical changes such as our blood pressure increasing. But anxiety doesn't stop in the absence of the stressor. And so I don't know if this has happened to you. I appreciate Stephen says he's grinding his teeth. Sometimes I find myself holding my arms really tight. You know, I went to a chiropractor and he told me that I was holding these muscles right here, but it was just like my lats or something. Like I was just holding them very tightly. And there wasn't anything unpleasant happening at that moment. And it certainly isn't happening all day, every day, that there's, a fight or flight response or a presentation or some of these issues happening. But I was holding that anyway, even in the absence of a trigger. And so anxiety is really more of a long-term, persistent manifestation of the same symptoms that we get from stress, but they don't go away, and we can't always figure out why they're happening, right? Or what the thing is that I can do to fix it. But they have important consequences for our health, such as insomnia, difficulty concentrating. Of course, who wouldn't have difficulty concentrating if you have insomnia, fatigue, muscle tension, irritability, weight gain? I don't know about you, but grad school really did a number on the scale at my house. And so these are some of the things that we can see that lead us to understand why we need to tackle anxiety and stress in a deliberate manner. Okay. And you're doing that, of course, by being here today. So I appreciate that. And so the last one that we want to think about is imposter syndrome, or was originally called in the 70s when it was identified imposter phenomenon. And this occurs when high achievers like yourselves, who are getting your MBA at UT, so you are by definition a qualified, intelligent, high achiever, is unable to accept success and understand that success has come from your ability and your hard work. Instead, with imposter syndrome, we tend to believe that we have had luck or that we have pulled the wool over someone's eyes, and that soon we will be unmasked as a fraud. And so imposter syndrome is a persistent underlying cause of stress and or anxiety. And so when I say stress or anxiety, it can be something that you notice it around a specific person or group, and then it goes away, or it can be something that you seem to feel all the time. And let me tell you, this is really, I talk to a lot of students who I coach, a lot of MBA students, about imposter syndrome. And it is very prevalent among the smartest, most, highest achieving individuals, because it just feels like everybody around us is so awesome and they're doing so well. How can they possibly be as great as they are? Now, I'm not saying everybody has this. There are certainly individuals who think they're awesome and they have no problem with it. But I would say for those of us who do struggle with it, we can identify that as something clearly related to graduate school, clearly related to the job transition that causes anxiety. So what is it that is happening? Okay, what is that picture if we put that all together? We experience stress, sometimes anxiety. You might be thinking of those two terms and noticing within yourself which of those you would say is characteristic for you. And these things happen with transitions or stressors, because transitions are full of unknowns as well as anticipation. And these are often undergirded, or the underlying factor there is a sense that we'll be unmasked as imposters, either or both in our graduate education and in this new role. And I see this especially relevant for career switchers. Okay, so we might have, maybe this is your story. We often have a lot of students who come from an engineering background and then decide that they would like to do consulting. And because you may have 5 years of a career, 10 years of a career, where people didn't really talk about emotional intelligence or empathy or people-centric work. And now that's the work that you're going to go do. And it feels a little bit like people are going to figure out the engineer in you. And importantly, you should know that they're definitely going to know the engineer in you, and they're going to love it. And that's what's going to make you so great at your job. And engineers can also be empathetic, emotionally intelligent, people-centric individuals. So we have to give ourselves the space to embody multiple identities at one time. So we've experienced these things and we want a change, but we don't know all the time how to achieve that change. So I want to give you this next metaphor to think about what's happening. So I kind of gave you some terms, and now I want to move on to thinking about this with a little bit of a story or a metaphor that helps me to conceptualize what it is that's going on inside of me. And maybe you've heard of this before. So if you have, drop that in the chat box. I'd love to know about it. Psychologist Dr. Jonathan Haidt talked about the elephant and the rider. Okay. And these are parts of our mental processing. Okay. So the elephant is our emotional side. And the elephant is really big and powerful and also just goes where it wants, right? It's just like, I think I'm going to go over there, and is not going to be easily deterred, especially by the rider. So the rider is our rational side, and the rider is only thinking of, where to go, what's the best path, how do I get there? So the rider is the rational side. But the rider often feels very small and easily taken over by the elephant, because the elephant is so big and so certain of where it's going in such a strong fashion. And so what Dr. Haidt is suggesting is that if we can think of what's happening inside us with this metaphor, then we can better understand how to get the rider and the elephant to work together. All right, so sometimes the elephant treats the rider like this, right? And what that means is that the elephant is, in this case, like, nope, I'm going to wallow. I'm going to wallow in these feelings, and I don't care what you want. I don't care what you're saying. And the rational side is trying, like, hey, let's get out of this emotion and get going. And the elephant is refusing. And maybe that's because the rider needs some better tips or some better skills. But we don't want to let our elephant, determine everything. We don't want to let our emotions or those emotional responses determine the experience that we're having, or be the totality of what we think about or feel about anytime we are examining the transition from school to employment. Now, you might be thinking, and I'm going to stop you here, that maybe we should just get rid of the elephant, right? Let's just get rid of the elephant. The rider can walk to the destination. But I want you to know that it is not the goal for the rider to abandon the elephant. You know why? Because eventually the rider's just going to stand there going, should I go left? Should I go right? Left has many great possibilities. Right is so interesting. Without the elephant, the rider can get stuck in too much thinking. But the elephant without the rider gets too stuck on carefree abandon and doing whatever it wants. And so the goal is instead to get our rider and our elephant moving together. And so this is just for us to think about that emotional takeover that sometimes happens in our bodies, and to get the rationality to jump in. And of course, as you may know, when we think in metaphors, when we think in stories, or we think in these simplistic caricatures, it actually can help us to make a shift in our processing. And that's because this simplifies or boils down the process to something that's manageable, even in the moment where our brains might be flooded with extra hormones or high blood pressure. When we can think through something as simple as this particular story, we can get back on track. So the goal is to get the rider in position with some strategy, but the rider also needs to listen to and respect the elephant. It's important not to abandon our elephant and not to overlook what is happening in our body so that as the writer, we can make valuable decisions about what path to take. So the goal here is the two of these in harmony. Okay, so let's get to some tips, right? What are some practical things that we can do to reduce stress and anxiety through the transition that we're making from school into employment? And as we talk through these tips, I want you to think about intentionality. I want to be very clear that peace and a reduction of anxiety is not just going to come to you. It is not floating through the air and you will just, it'll just smack you, or it'll envelop you, and then you'll have a sense of ease fall over you. To have that reduction in anxiety, you have to want it. You have to put the effort in. So there is some work involved to this. And when we do work, we know that we have to spend time on it. So it's about making a commitment to spending that time on it. So the first one is something I'm sure you're familiar with. And this tip is to set SMART goals. All right, and so SMART goals, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay, SMART goals. So setting a SMART goal, what we mean here is that whichever phase you're in, you set a goal about what it is that you can do as part of the process and when and how you're going to do it. Now, we want to set reasonable goals, right? Achievable is an important part here. So it's not, if you're experiencing anxiety over this transition, it's not very helpful to say, I want a job by December. While you might be able to say, well, that's timely, it's relevant, it's kind of specific. That is too big of a goal and too far away. So instead, I'd like you to think about with the context of what you are experiencing, what's a SMART goal that you can set that will make you feel better this week. Okay. So an example of this might be to say, I'm going to spend 1 hour a day with my family, uninterrupted by email or work. And during that time, I'm not going to talk about school or the job search. Okay. Now, how will you measure that you've done this? You can, log this. I like to keep a whiteboard dry erase marker in my bathroom and just make a tally. And then you'll be able to see that every day that you're working on that. Or maybe you ask your partner at the end of the week how you did every Saturday or Sunday. How did I do this week in achieving that? And at the end of the week, if you did achieve that, that'd be 7 hours without talking about or focusing on an employment transition. Now, that is a SMART goal that might be relevant and really necessary and helpful for people with families. But there are lots of ways to set SMART goals, and I know that you have many great ideas. So I would like to pause here and ask you if you can set a SMART goal, if you can think of one SMART goal that you can set right now, and think about who you can share it with, right? Sharing it creates accountability. And I welcome you to share it in the chat if you would like to. Then other people can understand what your SMART goal is. Now, SMART goals can be made for achieving employment, but I want you to think about the SMART goals related to your job and life transition that are related to reducing your anxiety. Okay, so I'm going to write one here. And this is actually something that I have been thinking about, and so I want to just write it down. I'm going to go on a 20, maybe to 30-minute walk 4 times weekly, and log this in my I think it's called Map My Walk app. Okay, so that's something that I'm going to do, that I can do, that is specific and measurable. And Melissa and I have similar ideas in mind, walking. And one of the things is that I often go on walks with my husband, and we try for some of those walks to specify the things we're going to talk about or not talk about. Because if we go on this walk and talk about the anxiety thing at the same time, it doesn't necessarily give us a reduction in anxiety because it's still just there with us. So I would love for you to write down or think about a SMART goal that you're going to do and who you're going to share that with for accountability purposes. Okay, and sharing that can occur with, of course, anyone who is also on the McCombs Plus team who are helping you find your next employment situation or helping you work on your resume or your value proposition pitch. You can share those SMART goals with them. Or if you have no idea, you're still confused how to write SMART goals, you can make a session with a coach and work on it with them. So the second tip that we have is to be honest with your support system. Now, one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is visit your career consultant. And I know that you already spend time with your career consultants, thinking about your employment, thinking about, the on-campus recruiting, looking at your resume, talking about your value proposition. But what I mean here when I say be honest with your support system is instead of just going and saying to them, what do you want me to do and how am I doing? Think about telling them honestly what is working for you and what is perhaps not working for you, what you need more clarification on, and anything that's about that process. What I have noticed is that sometimes we're reluctant to tell people who are experts about what's working for us or not working for us because we often think, due to imposter syndrome, if it's not working for me, it's because I'm failing and I just need to try harder. Instead, I want you to think maybe this one thing doesn't work for me. And if I tell my career consultant that, they're going to help me brainstorm more ways to achieve my goal. And so I have to be honest with them. Okay, so that's one way to be honest with someone. The second way is to be honest with somebody from your support system about how you're feeling. I know that many of you do not tell your friends or your loved ones or that parent or grandparent who lives far away and you only talk to them on the phone every once in a while. I know that you don't always tell them how you're feeling, but it's okay during this intense time of change, this really big life-changing experience and transition that you're never going to do again. This is it. It's really okay to tell them how you're feeling, that you're feeling anxiety, that you're feeling concern, and let them be there for you. So instead of protecting them from your big feelings, know that they can handle it. And even if it upsets them, that upset is a mutual expression of how much they love you. And so you can work through it together, because a lot of times we just need to share the burden with someone. And graduate school can be kind of a funny, it can be a little bit of a weird experience where we have a cohort who we may spend a lot of time with and we see them often, but they're not necessarily our people, our long-term people, the people who love us no matter what. So get with the people who love you no matter what and tell them, I'm struggling. And then you can even say to your people, I'm going to call you again when I need you. I don't want you to call me tomorrow and ask about it every day. Okay? That's just setting some boundaries, letting them know what you need, but making sure to share the burden so that it's not all on you and remaining hidden and stuffed down. So telling people is certainly a great way to manage our anxiety. Okay, let's talk about tip number 3. Tip number 3 is sleep. Sleep is scientifically proven to reduce stress and anxiety. It's also excellent for your physical and mental health. And you may have heard of this topic in the past year or two, but I thought it was something kind of fun to bring up and for you to ask yourself if you do this. It's called revenge bedtime procrastination, which is actually a translation. So it is perhaps not the most accurate way, but I think it's a great way to conceptualize this phenomenon of when it's time to go to bed, we actually do something else besides going to sleep. That might be scrolling social media. It might be turning on late night TV. It might be, doing some work on your laptop. And it's kind of a way of regaining control over our lives. So I'll ask you this. Do you ever lay in bed just looking at your phone and all of a sudden an hour has gone by and you realize I could have been sleeping for an hour, but instead I used that time to look at this nonsense internet stuff because I just simply needed to zone out. And zoning out and relaxing are very important, but screens often don't give us what we actually need, and lack of sleep doesn't help. And so I want you to think about if you are experiencing this revenge bedtime procrastination, if there's something that you can do to change that. That might be asking your partner for help. It could be putting your phone in another room, in a different space. It could be setting alerts that let you know when you have had too much time. Or, maybe you have a wearable device that can let you know what your sleep habits are like, and you can make some SMART goals related to sleep habits. I don't have a SMART wearable, but I've been wanting to get that ring. I don't know what it's called. Maybe you have one. Maybe you have an Apple Watch, but let me know if you have SMART goals. Ooh, the Aura ring. Thanks, Alex. If you have those and if they work for you, because I am very guilty of revenge bedtime procrastination. And I once saw a Valentine that you gave to your loved one, and it says, "You're my favorite person to lay in bed next to, not talking and looking at our phones together." So, modern day Valentine. It happens at dinner with friends too, right? And it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I on my phone? It's just a zone out. But what I'm saying is we need to notice what that actually is. It's overwhelm, it's stress, it's anxiety. And there are much better ways to physically feel better than to spend that time avoiding sleep. Okay, preaching to the choir. I mean, I'm talking to myself as I say this. I'm learning a lot even as I share it. But here is an activity that I use that's related to sleep that might help you. And to me, it helps in conjunction with the moving of my phone and putting things away, putting that out of reach. Because once I put my phone out of reach, then sometimes I find my thoughts spinning, and thought spinning is also not a good idea. And of course, there's reading, but sometimes my thoughts spin too much and I can't even read. I'm like, I'm not getting anything from the words. So I want you to think about trying this 3-3-1 activity. And the 3-3-1 activity, you actually start it sooner than when you're laying in bed. Okay, so this would be something that you start doing maybe as you start getting ready to brush your teeth. And the 3-3-1 is first you list 3 things that you accomplished today. And when I say list, it can be a mental list or you can actually write it down. So when you choose 3 things that you accomplished today, what that does is it reminds you you're not an imposter. You do achieve things. You're smart, you're good, you're intelligent. You are not a procrastinator at everything. You do get stuff done. Then you can list 3 things you want to achieve tomorrow. And these should be the sort of the big things, right? And then you have to tell yourself to stop. I'm only going to list 3. And by setting that intentionality, it eases some of the concern over the spinning of all the things that need to get done, and it focuses your mind on 3. And then the last bit, the 1, is you think of 1 happy memory, ideally something that you're proud of. Now, the reason behind this is that it's supposed to get us out of our to-do list and reflecting on what has been called eudaimonic happiness. Okay, eudaimonic happiness is the things in life that we find generally fulfilling, the things that make us who we are, the things that that we would say contribute to a good life. So when we think of this one happy memory and we focus on it, we're taking our brains out of the present and the to-do list and the to-done list, and we're settling our intention on the type of life that we want to have. So start your 3 things when you're brushing your teeth and you're getting ready and you're doing your achievement. And as you're getting into bed with no phone in sight, do the one happy memory and try to focus on as many elements of that happy memory as you can call up. And so we're moving on to our 4th tip, which is another type of breathing. And I think that many of you have probably heard of this, and we're going to practice it in just a moment. But this breathing has lots of different names, but it is typically, the term I like to use is called box breathing. And it helps me to picture this box, okay? And so box breathing is where we breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds out. Okay, so it's in, hold, 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 out, 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 hold, 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 hold. Okay, we're gonna try it because I found a GIF of it. Okay, okay, breathe in. It helps to make the noise. Okay, so hopefully you are able to try that. This is another form of breathing that is best practiced multiple times. And the deeper you breathe, the more impact you're going to get. As you breathe, I want you to think about filling your belly, filling your stomach with air. In fact, watching your stomach come out can be helpful because you're also releasing the tension that you might be holding in your core, and you're making sure that the breath is completely filling your lungs and expanding your chest. Okay, and so what that does is provides prime oxygenation. The holding leaves the oxygen there. I'm no doctor. Oh, I mean, I am a doctor, but not that kind of doctor, so I can't explain all the oxygenation to you. But it is scientifically proven to work. And this is what they teach the Navy SEALs to use. And it's because it provides calm and it tames that, what they call the vasovagus nerve. It really tames that fight or flight symptom. And so when we use a type of breathing like this, we can use this to go to bed. We can use this before a presentation. We can use this when we're sitting in our car in traffic. Often traffic's the worst, right? When we feel ourselves holding our teeth tightly, when we feel ourselves holding our neck tightly, any of those. When someone says, you know, something rude like, you look tired, we can use this breathing to try to feel better. But I like this just as much as I like the alternate nostril breathing because it's easy to remember. Okay, so these are some breathing techniques that I want you to try. And these techniques are designed to help you feel the maximum benefit. And so a recent study found that just 2 minutes of deep breathing can impact your heart rate variability, which just means getting that heartbeat back on track, which helps you relax and then can improve decision making. So you can imagine why Navy SEALs would want to do that, right? They have to make some very important decisions, but so do you. And so getting your breathing to work for you to help reduce stress and anxiety is a key, and one way that you can improve your life, even if you can't change your job situation right now. You can improve how you feel about it. So reducing anxiety and stress, of course, benefits your well-being. And there are so many ways, and I don't want to be scary, so I kind of put them in the most general terms. But job-related stress is related to negative cardiac events. And so we want to stay away from that. We don't want to have negative cardiac events, right, with our heart. And so the other thing is that it can help us avoid illnesses like severe clinical depression, which is, certainly some of us could even be more predisposed to it. So the more we can do to reduce stress or anxiety is going to help with these challenging illnesses. And that's just one. But reducing stress and anxiety, we learned earlier about what all the symptoms are. Well, if we reduce it, we're going to reduce those symptoms. We're going to reduce irritability. We're going to reduce stomach ache, headache, migraine, fatigue, and of course, improve our decision making. And generally help ourselves remember what it is that we're doing here, why we sought the MBA, what type of career we want, and what type of life we want. And it helps us to notice I'm getting all of those things right now, even though my body says, I can help my body and my brain realize we are getting the things that we want out of life by doing this. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, hey, if there's something more intense going on than that, and you know your body, please use the resources that are available to you. And a great resource is the Counseling and Mental Health Center at UT, and they have a crisis line. But I know that a lot of us might think, well, what's a crisis? Maybe this isn't a crisis. I don't want to clog up the crisis line. They also offer virtual counseling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, chatting and phone calls through the app. So like texting, chat, and phone calls. And that's through the My SSP app. And you can find all of that on their webpage. And so it is, as a student, it's a great time to go get mental health resources while that is part of the resources that you have available to you. So I always recommend availing yourself of all of the resources you have as a student. And sometimes we get so busy that we don't, and we forget, hey, this is actually a great benefit of being a student. So why not check it out? And so that's my recommendation for that. So we're going to wrap up. We're going to move on towards the conclusion. But even as we wrap up, I want to remind you the Q&A is going to follow that, where the recording will stop and you can ask questions if you have any. But before we get there, I spoke just a tiny bit about overall life happiness and eudaimonic happiness. And I suggest this book for any of you who are thinking of what are some practical ways and what is the science behind happiness and making sure that I'm feeling happy in my life. I like this book a lot. It's called The Happiness Project. And there's so many different tips, but also all that science behind it. And I did mention that creating a more satisfying life, reducing anxiety, reducing stress, it has some work to it. But that work doesn't have to be drudgery. It can be work towards happiness. And that is a really good kind of work and a good kind of work that you can be proud of. So today, we really went over a lot of different things related to anxiety and stress. And I hope that you remember the elephant and the rider. I hope that you remember those tips for breathing and tapping into your support system. And really, each person who's listening is going to have something different resonate. And that's the goal, because you're all experiencing the same phenomena, but doing so very differently and uniquely, and all with your own specific context. And so you have to embrace that diverse experience. So there are plenty of resources for you to check out, including contacting me. And so my website, we went over how to access that. Here's my email. And these slides are going to be available in the Canvas page. So you can either go to my coach page, or you can go look at this webinar again and get these links. But I'm here to talk about it. Now, it's also good to say, your coaches are not counselors, and coaches really focus more on tips for practice and doing things that help you feel successful in the future. But I love to talk about happiness, wellness, conflict resolution, being your best self and ways to manage anxiety. So please contact me if that's something that you would like to talk about. So, Megan, I think we did it. I think we ended